Before astronauts went into space, they studied special places on Earth. They wanted to be prepared for what they might find when they went to the moon. And what did they find when they came to Idaho? Come along and see.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Before they went to the moon, 4 astronauts came to Idaho. More specifically, they came here.
The craters of the moon is a spectacular place. It's an ideal place to study a high, broad range of the geologic impact.
NASA has long used Craters of the Moon National Monument as a science lab. Researchers have studied its geology and biology for clues about our planet and how we might explore other worlds. Back in 1969, astronauts Gene Cernan, Edgar Mitchell, Joe Engle, and Alan Shepard toured Craters of the Moon.
The idea was to get us well trained in volcanics and meteor impacts so that we could be the eyes of the geologists when we were on the moon.
At that time, NASA was reluctant to have anyone in the Apollo program who wasn't already a trained pilot. But they said, well, let's train these guys to be field geologists. In other words, what to look for when in the field, how to identify different formations, how to identify different rocks, how to describe them in proper terminology back to the scientists back at home.
And is the actual moon anything like Idaho's Craters of the Moon? Well, here's how Apollo astronaut Edgar Mitchell described the surface of the moon on the very first Science Trek program.
Its surface, it's like very, very fine talcum powder, but it's made of basalt rock, or lava rock, that's been pummeled and ground up by billions of years of meteor impact to a very, very fine pumice.
So, not exactly. But that doesn't mean training at Craters of the Moon wasn't important. Quite the opposite. The astronauts were so impressed that 3 of the 4 came back to Craters of the Moon in 1999 to honor and celebrate the monument's 75th anniversary and its contribution to the Apollo program. For Morris, who was the monument's superintendent at the time, the best part of the astronauts' return to Craters for him was seeing them interact with students.
Students from various schools would compete in teams to design a rover out of Legos and run through obstacle courses. One of these school groups had a problem, and they had to stop, and they had to get together as a group of 4, 5, 6 students and figure out this problem. Well, Gene Cernan was standing right there looking kind of over their shoulder, and he said, let me tell you, students, this is very similar to a problem we had when we were on the moon. When the moon buggy, the fender came off. What we decided to do was we took our topo maps, folded them up till they became somewhat rigid, taped them together with duct tape, and replaced our fenders with that.
And Dina, how you doing on that fender? Bob, I am done. If that fender stays on, I'm going to take a picture of it, because I'd like some sort of mending award. It's not too neat, but tape and lunar dust just don't hang in there together. Okay, copy that.
And that, young man, is what you have in your hands right there, is some maps, some cardboard, some duct tape. And you're solving your problem very same way. Well, those kids' eyes, they were just entranced with all the story. And of course, the parents were loving it as well.
Today, NASA is still sending scientists to Craters of the Moon.
We have an incredibly multidisciplinary team out here to answer questions relevant to how does Craters of the Moon actually help us understand the moon, Mars, asteroids and so forth in our solar system.
I had one scientist tell me that they probably shouldn't have called it Craters of the Moon because what they're finding is the volcanoes here are very similar to a lot of the Martian volcanoes that we see. And so maybe they should have called it Volcanoes of Mars instead.
And by the way, what happened to the 1969 astronauts who visited Idaho? Engle got bumped from the moon missions, but commanded 2 space shuttle flights. Shepard and Mitchell walked on the moon in 1971 with Apollo 14. Cernan commanded Apollo 17 in 1972 and was the last human, at least so far, to leave footprints on the moon.
And as we leave the moon in Taurus Littrow, we leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return with peace and in hope for all mankind.
If you want to learn more, head to the Science Trek website or check our related videos. And if you like Science Trek, be sure to click the subscribe button to catch our newest videos.